Hi, my name is Nicole Lasham, and I'm the editor-in-chief of the Rainbow Times, New England's largest LGBTQ newspaper since 2006. Throughout these past 12 years, we've covered issues not only relating directly to the LGBTQ community, but also all of our individual, shared, and collective identities. This year, we wanted to sit down with the Salem At-Large City Council candidates and incumbents to find out exactly where they stand on the issues that impact all of us, especially those of us that live, work, play, and thrive in Salem. I'd like to thank all of the candidates that took the time to sit down with us in this intensive one-on-one interview, giving us for more than 45 minutes of their time so that you could understand, so that I could understand, so that we could collectively understand where exactly they stand on these issues. Those that participated were Melissa Faulkner, Conrad Prusnewski, George McCobb, Domingo Dominguez, Ty Hapworth, Alice Merkel, Elaine Milo, and last but not least, Jeff Cohen. Although all candidates were invited to participate, unfortunately, Belle Stedman and Gary Gill declined to be interviewed for the series. Likewise, Art Sargent was not able to be reached via email or phone and did not reply to our requests. On behalf of the Rainbow Times, its management and staff, our publisher, Grayson Ocasio, and myself, we thank you for watching this series. We hope that you learn just as much as we did. Let's get started. Ty, thank you for joining us for this interview. It's a pleasure to sit down and get to chat with you about all things Salem with the Rainbow Times. So welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. I know that you and your family moved down here from Maine. Is that right?
So originally, my wife Micah and I are high school sweethearts. So we grew up in Maine. I think Micah and I saw each other. I saw Micah. She might not remember me, but I saw her for the first time when we were 12 years old in the lunchroom.
Wow.
Started dating in high school. We went to college together at the University of Maine. I joined the Army while we were in college. Graduated. Then we got married. Took our honeymoon in beautiful tropical Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Wow.
Not really the honeymoon that we probably deserved at that time.
Interesting choice, yeah.
But lived out in Oklahoma for a few years. Came back to New England in 2009 after I got out of the Army, and came to Salem in 2014.
Wow.
Right before our daughter's birth.
That's amazing. So how's Salem treating you so far?
It's been phenomenal. So I think I was telling you off camera. I think that communities, I think, can change people. I think that having a community like Salem, where you have these unplanned interactions with people, where you walk down a street and you see somebody that you might know from pick up and drop off at school, or you might know just from seeing them in restaurants frequently. You run into people again and again. I think it builds ties to the community, and I don't think we intended initially to stay in Salem. It was just affordability that brought us here. We found a home within a commute of Boston that we could afford to live in, and but we just absolutely fell in love with this city to the point where, if it was a choice between Salem and my work, I would probably choose Salem at this point.
Wow, that says a lot.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, go ahead.
So in terms of affordability, that's one of the reasons that you got here, and yet right now in 2019, we're dealing with the housing crisis. A lot of people are leaving Salem. Also, a lot of people are coming into Salem that do have some more means to be able to afford the cost of living. What do you have planned, or what options can you provide forward or put forward that would help to solve the housing crisis?
Yeah, I think that the important thing to acknowledge is that the way I look at it, if you look at what a lot of experts will tell you, is that we're not in a single housing crisis right now. We're in two separate crises that just appear to be the same thing. I think the first one is just rampant income inequality across the country. This is in every single community right now. There are people struggling just to put a roof over their heads, no matter what the cost of housing is. We're dealing with that here in Salem right now. And then the second one is a housing shortage. And I think that's a difficult one to solve as well. But there's been 2.5 times the amount of jobs added into the greater Boston area as homes in the last few years. There's incredible competition for homes. So I guess the way I would look at it is we have to try things and see what works, and then continue to move forward. There's not. I think we all look for a silver bullet, and as options get brought to the table, people say, well, this won't work because of X, or this won't work because of this. Something I've learned in leadership is you can't be paralyzed into inaction by the what ifs, by all the possible this could happen or this could happen. You have to make informed decisions. You have to look for things that can move the needle forward. I think one thing is accessory dwelling units. It's come up recently, and I think that it's been a tool in other communities that has given minimal impact into neighborhoods. But it's by nature creating these small, affordable units that would be something that younger families could live in or seniors could live in. It would also help people who are struggling to stay in their own home get a little extra income so that they can continue to age in place and live in Salem.
Sure.
I think that's low-hanging fruit. I think that's an easy one to do, but I think we also need to, in addition to just passing that ordinance, I think we need to look at education within the city and see how do we inform people about how they can make this happen on their own properties. Because if we do it and only 20 people apply to create an ADU, because they're going to be expensive to create. If only 20 people do it, then we haven't solved a lot. We've helped out 20 people potentially, which is good. It's better than nothing. But I think that the educational aspect, I think, is an important part of it as well.
In terms of the income inequality component, who do you think is the most disenfranchised when it comes to income inequality right now in Salem?
I think probably our immigrant community is certainly incredibly disenfranchised right now. I think a lot of, and that goes also to millennials, and I think that there's an entire generation that has been sort of left out of a lot of the gains that have happened in our economy. Our economy looks great on paper in America, but it's not doing well for a lot of people. That's working class families, that's millennials, and it's our immigrant community. So I think that's probably where we see, and it's also something that's threatening our identity and our diversity in this city right now.
And along those lines, the Sanctuary for Peace Ordinance, of course, I'm sure you've heard lots about. Are you in favor of maybe expanding it, strengthening it, keeping it the same, or repealing it? Where are you on that specific issue?
So I think I would be generally in favor of expanding it. So I was in favor of Sanctuary for Peace, which was a very light sanctuary ordinance.
Right.
And I think there's some confusion within the community about what maybe we actually voted on in 2017. I think that served its purpose of reassuring our immigrant community that still call the police here in Salem. You're safe here in Salem. I think that was an important step to take. If members of the immigrant community, I don't want this to be something that Ty Hapworth as a white male is saying this is what this community needs right now. But if it's something that our immigrant community needs and something that I'm hearing from them, I would 100% be amenable to looking at strengthening that ordinance.
Good. And how would you do that in the sense that there are, well, I suppose whatever happens with the election, but when that was eventually passed, it was a very hard battle to win, even though there was no federal funding at risk of being lost, and it really just served, as you said, as that document to sort of give confidence to the immigrant community to be able to call police without fear of retribution or calling ICE or anything like that. So how would you particularly work with other people in council that may have a completely opposite viewpoint to yours on strengthening that so that we can get that done?
Yeah, I think the key within any community is getting people to see each other as human beings, and I think that I think we struggle with that in a lot of communities where we have neighborhoods that are pretty strictly segregated because of decades-old policies, and issues that we've had, where people don't know who lives in this neighborhood. I think that initiatives like the Punta Urban Art Museum, which I'm on the board of, on the advisory board for the Punta Urban Art Museum. I think those initiatives that encourage people to walk into primarily immigrant neighborhoods, walk down alleyways to look at art, interact with people, and understand that these are families that are bringing their kids to school, cooking dinner, going about their daily life, and there's nothing to be scared of in our immigrant community. I think that's probably an important first step is strengthening organizations like that, partnering with organizations like that. I think there's probably a big educational aspect that needs to happen within the community. I think our counselors, like it or not, they respond to what they're hearing within their own neighborhoods. And I think that it's on the council, and it's something that I would look at as my own role to make informed decisions and not just listen to the loudest voices in the room. Sure. But I think that it's important to educate in our community about this. This is what this ordinance would do. This is who it's protecting. This is why we feel that we need it. Because I think that the Sanctuary for Peace, I mean, there's a lot of people that work very, very hard on that and education in the community, but maybe there's time to sort of look back on that and say, what could we have done differently? I don't want to cast judgment on anybody who worked on that, because they did an incredible job, but there is confusion within the community, and I don't know if that was purposefully spread or how that happened, but when I'm at the doors, I've knocked on over almost 4,000 doors at this point. When that topic comes up, there is confusion around sanctuary. So if we strengthened it, I think we probably would need to look at education within the community.
And how can tech contribute to that? Because as I'm listening to you speak, I'm thinking about social media and all sorts of misinformation that we're seeing on social media, including back when the Sanctuary for Peace Ordinance was first, proposed and to be voted on. And so I'm wondering, how can we use technology to sort of educate people within the city? You're a tech professional, right? And so how can we use that to help drive those education measures?
I think utilizing I think social media is utilized for communication from the city and from counselors. I think that's the role that it plays. I don't think counselors should be on social media stirring up controversies or getting people riled up over issues before we all understand the full extent of it. If we move forward with something like strengthening that ordinance potentially, I think that being very clear about our messaging on social media would probably be important within that.
Do you think that social media is used to spread a lot of misinformation, not just from the counselors, but also like city residents for various purposes, whether it's bias or whether it genuinely is lack of information?
This is all over the country right now, and it's an issue that we're going to have to grapple with, and our kids are going to have to grapple with, because human beings, I think, just it's not our fault. I think we just have a difficulty absorbing information and understanding what's real and what's true. You see something and you say, okay, I understand that topic, now I'm going to move on to the next thing, because you're hit with a million different topics throughout the day.
Sure.
I think that it's certainly an issue. It's something that what I've noticed at the doors is I've seen that social media is not real. So you hear the same. If it's 5 voices, they sound really, really loud on social media. People don't feel that way out in the community. But where social media is, I think, effective, and where it is driving, it's driving those conversations. So it's potentially 5 really loud voices that feel very strongly about a topic, but they are driving the conversation. I can tell you, just watching various social media groups, I try not to participate, but watching them and then going to the doors, those topics come up within less than 24 hours at the doors as they roll around the different Salem groups. As I get to the doors, people want to know. They want to know about the bike lanes. They want to know about parklets. They want maybe things that maybe they haven't even seen the parklet, but they want to know, what are we doing about this, or what do you think about this? So I think that understanding that social media is driving these conversations, but it's not indicative of the way people actually always feel about a topic is important.
Is there a way to stop that from happening, do you think?
I don't know that there is at a city level. I really wish that there was.
Yeah.
I think that as a city, we could probably do a better job of anticipating how things are going to be received before we implement them. So I think probably the bike lanes are a great example. And you didn't even ask me about bike lanes, but I brought it up.
Right.
I think that bike lanes are a great thing in a community. I think testing before we implement is also a fantastic thing that other communities have done well. I think where we maybe missed the boat a little bit on it is that it wasn't implemented in a way that could get, so if you look at North Street, the cyclists could get from one side of Salem to Leslie's Retreat Park, but there wasn't really a way into downtown at that point. And I think a lot of the bike lanes look like that, where there weren't ways to get them into the community, so there was maybe a little less usage on them. There also wasn't. I know there are metrics being tested on the bike lanes. I don't actually know what they are, and I don't know that a lot of people know what they were. I think if we had gone back and said, okay, this is how social media is going to receive this. It's going to be parking spots taken away.
Yeah.
It's going to be bike lanes that are going to be potentially empty at times of the day, and there's going to be photos taken of those empty lanes. We need to make sure we execute this perfectly. Like does this need to be done, or does this not need to be done? Right. I think communicating, say, 3 metrics, saying, here's 3 things we're testing right now. We're testing the amount of people riding in these bike lanes, reduction in traffic on North Street, and parking in our Museum Place garage. Say. You take those 3 things and say, this is what we're testing, and then you make the bike lanes so they can actually access places that people want to go. And then I think you're ahead of the social media battle, because it's going to come back on you, because there are anything new that is tried in a city is open to criticism from folks. And I think the worst thing the city can do is make people right. And I think in some of these cases, in these testing, the city of Salem made the critics right, because I don't know that there was a lot of usage on some of those bike lanes. I haven't seen the metrics yet. Yeah. But I think that something like that is maybe a losing battle.
And how did you feel about the scooter program?
Okay, if you'd asked me this question a week ago, I would probably tell you that the scooter program, from where I sit, literally where I sit on Brown Street, where my wife and I live, I see tourists using them, typically. And I know I'm in a tourist-heavy part of town, but I see bike lanes, I see the scooters being used by tourists who are having fun, and great, they're having fun, but I don't think that's the intention of the scooters. I think the intention of the scooters is to get people last mile from, if I live at the end of Lafayette, or if I live in North Salem, and I might not be inclined to walk to the train station, the scooter is going to maybe encourage me to make that commute and leave my car at home. But I wasn't seeing that happening, I think, up until about last week. And then I think when I was driving down Canal Street last week, and I saw a group of Salem State students in where they're supposed to be riding, which is on Canal Street, coming from Salem State into town. And I thought, like, this is the use case. This is people not using a car, not taking up parking spaces downtown, not contributing to our traffic, and potentially spending money at our restaurants and shops downtown. Yeah. So I would love to see more information on that. I don't have knowledge of who was using the scooters and how the pilot went. But if it's working that way, that's great. If it's just tourists taking them because it's fun, then that's probably not worth the headache that we see from it.
Did you try out the scooters?
I have not tried out the scooters. Alice Merkel has tried out the scooters.
Yes.
If you asked her about them.
I know. I know. Okay, so what are we going to do about all of these people coming into Salem from all over the place? I mean, obviously it's a very touristy city, not only in October anymore, although obviously that's the busiest season, but all year round we're seeing more and more tourists coming into the city. And we're also seeing a lot more people moving into the city. How are we going to deal with traffic with these narrow little constructed roads from way back when to be able to handle the type of traffic that we're getting now? Yeah,
I think that the issue that we see. So I am okay with new housing coming into Salem, and I understand that there's a giant demand in the greater Boston area for homes. But I think if we're just adding people and cars to a given neighborhood, one development with say 20 condos and a little more than 20 vehicles may not have a noticeable traffic impact. But when you do that again and again and again, it adds traffic, and it for sure has. And even the record unemployment that we have right now is increasing the traffic, probably because people they have jobs to go to, and they're commuting into Boston. So I think as we're adding these, I talked in the forum at the League of Women Voters Forum last night about looking at what's a strong neighborhood and what's a strong community.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a strong neighborhood has multiple transit options.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've made some progress in some areas around Salem with that, but I think it could certainly get better. I think that, to go back to bike lanes, having connected bike lanes is important. And there are initiatives, there are plans to connect our bike lanes and do a little better job of that in the future. But it's not, our bike network is not going to get used until all those weak links have been sorted out. It's sort of like a chain where if people don't feel safe on one section of the bike lane, they're not going to use them. And I think we could do a better job of that. A shuttle service, I think, is something that we need in Salem, and I think it has to be a smart shuttle service. It has to be something that, the worst thing we could do is to have a shuttle service that comes in and it just circles some of the key neighborhoods in Salem, and it just drives around with 2 people in it.
Yeah.
And then we got people taking pictures of the bus with 2 people in it, and that's the problem.
That is
So
it's an optics problem.
that's an optics problem.
Right, yeah.
But I think if you have a shuttle system, and I think that the one that we're looking at right now would be something that's closer to like an Uber pool, where it's you're in this location, you want to go to that location, and all these other people in these locations, they all want to go to these other locations. What are the most efficient routes we can create? So you don't have to walk to the same bus stop every day. You may have to walk a block and a half to meet up with other people who are nearby. Something like that, but it has to work, I think, the first time we try it.
Yeah.
If you look at mass transit in other cities, if it's not widely adopted by every income level, then they tend to fail. I think it has to be something that is used across the city to get people from A to B.
No, in terms of the shuttle, are you thinking about that in terms of like the MBTA that would be shuttling people, or is this would this be like a Salem designated city shuttle?
Yeah, Salem designated city shuttle. It's something we're still studying right now, but I think it would have to be. I don't know that we can rely. Unfortunately, I don't know that we can rely on the MBTA to solve our transit issues in Salem. I wish that we could, but I think we're not there yet, and the city can't affect that as much as we'd like to, unfortunately. But I think something like a shuttle service within the city, and then maybe potentially between cities at some point. Because the other issue we see is there's traffic in Salem that doesn't want to be in Salem. There's traffic. If you look at the issues that we see on Highland Avenue, it's not people that even want to be on Highland Avenue. It's people that are coming from Swampscott and Marblehead, and they want to be in Peabody.
Right.
And they have to make that little turn, and then they back up all the traffic. So looking at maybe shuttle systems that take people across the area communities and partnering with neighborhood communities to do that, I think would also be important. And then the third one is just improving pedestrian access in Salem. It's historically, it's a walkable city. It's what I enjoy about Salem, but it's walkable for me because I'm I'm completely ably bodied. I can get around things. I can negotiate cobblestones, and I think that making our sidewalks more accessible to more people is something that's also going to be important. Kylie Sullivan at Salem Main Streets did a project where she had the pool noodle and she walked around town with some volunteers to see what was actually accessible. And there's a lot of places that just aren't, unfortunately.
Yeah. And there's a lot of problems with cracked sidewalks and hills on sidewalks and just some that are completely destroyed. And in terms of the cobblestone, it's funny because that was another topic that we would get to in terms of accessibility. We have had many people reach out to us specifically for this interview series to address issues of accessibility or inaccessibility in the city, including in buildings where there is technically an elevator, but it's very difficult to even get to the elevator and so on and so forth. So when we're dealing with those types of issues, cobblestones, for example, where somebody who is not able-bodied to be able, to get down safely, how do we fix that? Like, what innovations can we use so that we preserve the integrity of the cobblestones, of course, because it's a part of historical Salem, and there's going to be a big battle to, obviously, people are not going to want to rip out all the cobblestones.
And it'll be a battle with my wife probably as well.
Right.
So when we say cobblestones, also I think bricks is probably the more used material in Salem.
Yes, but in considering that to walk on as a surface, how can we make things like that more accessible so that we preserve the integrity, but still people that need the assistance to be able to walk on a smoother surface that have some sort of disability are able to do so? I
think if you look at brick sidewalks that have been done well in communities, they are ADA compliant and they're accessible and they're also easier to repair in a lot of ways. So I think we look at a short-term solution. Concrete is generally, if you look at brick that's done poorly, which in a lot of communities brick sidewalks are, they're just sort of laid down on top of asphalt in some cases. Those are going to crack and those are going to bow and those issues. But concrete, when concrete breaks, you have to replace the whole thing, and concrete tends to cause more issues, I think, when it cracks and it sort of bows up. So I think looking at, and I'm not a brick expert for sure, but just from what I read about the differences between the two sidewalks, I think that brick sidewalks can be more sustainable. You can reuse bricks; they're permeable. The rainwater can seep into them rather than just rushing off. And they can be ADA compliant if it's done the right way. So I think that's probably an important thing to and that's also a place where we can find compromise too, because there are places in Salem that are going to be incredibly resistant to ripping up all of our brick sidewalks and putting in concrete. And I don't blame them, because I think that it's a key part of the way we think about Salem. But we have to be accessible, so we have to do it the right way. And I think there are ways to do that. We just have to be clear about what we want and what that should look like.
So you're committed to making Salem more accessible?
Yes.
Okay, cool. In terms of the arts, art, I mean, you look around Salem, you see, beautiful artwork. You mentioned it in the point. Obviously, there are organizations like Creative Collective that does a whole lot of, innovative artwork. And Salem Main Streets, of course. The arts is a really integral part of Salem in general. Do you think that it's critical to the sustainability of diversity and inclusion to have a strong and effective arts program and arts center, per se, around Salem?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think that art tells a community story. And if you look at the art that has been created by various communities around the world, it's at its best when it's telling a story about that group of people and what their experience is in the world. And it also tends to brings communities together, because it brings people out. If we're talking about art, even as performance art, creating programming in places like the new park at 289 Derby, that's a key not only to that park's viability as a place that the community can be at, but also a place that people can gather. And I think when I look at that, we can have our opinions about whether or not we should have purchased that. It's been purchased and the park's been built at this point. What we should be looking at is using a place like that as a bridge between two neighborhoods, or three neighborhoods, or four neighborhoods. And I think that things like that, the arts can bring communities together in a city like Salem.
And how about things like a business improvement district? Are you on board with something like that, or no, and why?
I am on board with that. So it's something Boston has done, and they've done it well in Boston.
Couple of them,
yeah. And when I look around so I'm on the beautification committee in Salem here, and there's two members of the beautification committee in particular who've done a great job of maintaining. If you look at that strip down the middle of Washington Street, that's one of the most beautifully planted. I don't know if anyone pays attention besides me, but I think a lot of people probably do, and it's a beautifully well maintained strip because those volunteers spend their time working on it. But if you go, a couple streets over onto Central Street, there are plans for the local businesses there to work on that, but that is overgrown and it's not. It doesn't look right. There are a lot of places downtown that we just don't have. I mean, we don't have the manpower to water these flowers, to pull weeds, to clean up cigarette butts, which is a lot of things we see downtown. I think doing something like a downtown improvement district where businesses contributed towards just the overall look and feel of that area would be something that would probably be important. It's something that businesses are taking on their own. I mean, there are businesses that sponsor traffic islands, or they sponsor spaces outside of their stores, but it's inconsistent. There's some that do it, some that don't do it, and I think that the overall look and feel of a neighborhood can be diminished by just one space where you see something that's not kept up. So I think something like that would probably be important. It would be nice to see, because it's a neighborhood that is it's not just the residents of downtown that interact and go there. It's tourists, it's people from all over the city. I think it needs probably a little extra help.
Yeah, and then obviously it'll also increase the revenue that those businesses are able to bring in, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if they have this great sort of area that they've maintained well and that looks beautiful, it attracts to the eye, and that's where you want to go as well.
If people want to spend more time downtown, and not just tourists, I would love to see residents spending more
That's
time shopping in local stores and give businesses a reason to start up downtown that might serve residents rather than, the witch shops are great and they're fun, but I would love to see more businesses downtown that also were geared towards residents. I think having a place that residents wanted to go and spend time would be
Well,
beneficial.
yeah, and like in Salem, obviously the fall, particularly October, is the big season. But what can we do year round to continue to build on the local economy so that the whole influx of tourism and monies generated by the city is not mostly just in October, but really distributed quite substantially throughout the year? How do we get to that point?
I think, and I mentioned this last night at the forum as well, I think one of the things that we could do better as a city is we could tell our own story better. And I think when I working for Microsoft, I travel to different places and I meet people from all over the world, and when I tell them I'm from Salem, most people know what that means. Whether they're from Texas or China, they know Salem. But they know Salem as witches. Something about witches. Sure. It's always, and I think that I don't know that's the image that and we've got a Wiccan culture here in Salem, and we're a very accepting community. I think that's all fantastic. And my kids love Halloween. My kids were dressed up in their Halloween costumes yesterday for some reason.
Oh, interesting. Well, perfectly acceptable in Salem.
They came in the mail and they wore them. And that's all fun. That's great. But we have a richer story, I think, to tell in Salem. I think that this from my perspective, and I think from a lot of people's perspectives, when you look at Salem's history, it's a history of reaching out to the world and the world reaching back into Salem. And I think if we did a better job of telling that story, then we could attract, and we do attract tourists year round. Because I look out my window and I see tourists out there. But I think we could do a better job of evening that scale, where it's not just everybody makes all their money in October.
That's right.
And I think there's some things like this Destination Salem is exploring descendant tourism, I guess they call it, or genealogy tourism, Descendants Day they called it, where there's millions of people in the United States who have descendants that came to America first in Salem, and I think that's another place that we could grab onto at other seasons that could bring more people into the city. And then I think just when we're telling our own story, if we're telling a more full picture of Salem and its maritime history and its history of innovation and multiculturalism, I think that teaches other people or tourists to treat our city a little bit differently. Instead of coming in looking to maybe have a couple beers and go ride on some carnival rides, there's other things you can do in Salem. There's museums you can go to. There's cool shops that you can visit. There's historical homes you can tour. There's a lot of things that you can do in Salem. And I think that if we do a better job of telling our story to the outside, I think that's only a benefit to our businesses.
And you mentioned a little bit about the Wiccans, of course, and it actually triggered another topic that I want to jump into, which is religion and separation of church and state, and how religion has influenced many politicians' policy-making strategies from the national scale down. Where are you on whether you have a personal faith or not, and how will that impact your policy decisions, or will it not?
So I was raised Unitarian, which is a very, very relatively liberal Protestant religion. It's not something that influences my day to day. I think that there's a lot of people that find comfort in religion and find answers in religion. I respect that. It's something that I've done research into a lot of different religions to understand sort of their point of view and the way that they view the world. For me, I think I look at the world from a little more of a scientific point of view. I know that I'm inherently influenced by growing up Christian in a Protestant household, but I think that things like that are things that we also have to be able to step outside of ourselves for a second and see how others might view the world. Not everybody grew up the way that I grew up with the values that I consider my own values may not be universal to everybody else. And I think that that's something I've learned in leadership is everybody has a different background and a different perspective, not just in religion, but in just the way that the environment they were raised in. And I think a key feature or a key thing that makes leaders good is when they're able to step outside of their own experience and turn around and look and see what the other person's seeing. And I think that's difficult, but I think it's necessary because there's, we're a very diverse and multicultural city.
Now, what happens? Say you win a council seat, right? And you're on the council, and something is, something is being voted on, particularly relating to a marginalized group, whether it be the Latino community, the LGBTQ community, wage theft, whatever the issue is, and someone cites their religious beliefs or anything like that as a reason, whether it's privately or publicly, but you know that that's driving the decision behind their vote. Is that ethical when you're representing an entire city of people? It's not.
In my opinion, your religion can have a place in your own values, I guess, as at a very base level. But I think that when you, especially if you bring it up as this is my religion, this is why I feel this way, especially when you're an elected official, I think that's problematic. And you could look at that from a couple different ways. And certainly this is a hypothetical, and you don't know how that would present itself. But I would say my gut level reaction to that would be a problem in city government.
Where are you on the LGBTQ community?
I'm fully supportive of the LGBTQ community, and I think that now more than ever, it's important to. When you look at the federal government that we have right now, it is my friends that are in the LGBTQ community. Who I'm 36 years old. My friends are married and they have kids now, and a lot of them feel uneasy about whether or not they'll be protected moving forward. And I think that in this period of time, I think it's important for local municipalities to be willing and ready to step up and protect and support their neighbors. If we don't have full confidence, and I'm not saying that the federal government is going to do anything, but I also don't have full confidence and faith that those groups are being protected right now. I think that's why I think it's important for city leaders to be able to do things at the municipal level. There's also a snowball effect too, where if local municipalities adopt pro-LGBTQ policies or positions, it gives other communities an incentive to also maybe do it, and then that can snowball up to the federal level. I think that's where a lot of these things can happen.
Now, you were in the Army. Did you serve with transgender troops?
I did not. I served with LGBTQ troops, and I was in the Army when it was not, when it was Don't Ask, Don't Tell at that time. So it was I don't know when President Obama, but I think that it was at that time when it was an open secret within the units. But I did not serve with, as far as I know.
As far as, right, exactly.
So I think that's an important thing for me to also step back and remember that I likely did serve with transgender soldiers, but nobody who felt comfortable enough to be out. There were soldiers that were LGBTQ, and they were out, but they weren't. They were out to their friends, and it was sort of something that they knew.
Yeah, because they've actually found more than 15,000 transgender troops serving in the military. Yeah. And of course, at the national level, what they have tried to do to ban transgender service members. What are your thoughts on that, being from the military?
I think it's a horrible thing to have done. I think that anybody who's willing to serve their country, and the military can be a little more conservative than other parts of the world, but I found no discrimination towards other soldiers for those reasons. I think that people who are willing to serve their country should be applauded, and they shouldn't be made to feel like there's anything wrong with them, or there's any kind of an issue with the life decisions or not even life decisions, but the life that they've been given. I think that's important.
Who they are.
Right.
I
think is important, and I think that you know, in the organization I work for right now, Microsoft is very, a big part of our culture is encouraging everybody to be exactly who they are. And that extends beyond LGBTQ to just to introverts versus extroverts, or, you know, however you feel comfortable being, I think is where you maximize, where you get the fullest potential out of yourselves. And I think from a just from a practical standpoint, I think the Army should be, and the military should be pro-LGBTQ and should allow transgender troops.
Now, speaking of Microsoft and your experience being a tech professional, how do you see Salem implementing more technology so that we can move ourselves further ahead?
Yeah, I think things, as I already mentioned, the bus, the sort of smart bus route. I think that's a good first step within Salem. I think probably other things that we could do is we've got a fiber network coming online, I think in the next year or two. But the Sci-Fi network that's coming on, I think is going to give businesses an incentive to locate in a city like Salem. And I think encouraging maybe high-tech employers, but also any kind of employers to come to Salem is going to be an important thing that we're going to need to be able to do. And I think we're going to have to be able to speak the language of those companies to do that. You look at where companies are locating today, they're not going to, my company is located in Redmond, Washington. Not a lot of companies going to communities like that anymore. They're looking for places like New York City, like Boston, like San Francisco, London. Those are the metropolitan areas that are walkable and are places that millennials want to live today. Salem is maybe a small version, but is one of those places, and I think we don't give ourselves enough credit sometimes when we say Salem is a bedroom community and a tourist community. It doesn't have to be, and for most of its community, for most of its history, it wasn't. I think that encouraging tech companies to come in here by how we promote ourselves is going to be important. I think having people on the council that can speak to those employers and can sort of guide that messaging, I think will be an important thing in the future. And also just for our own taxes, you know, commercial properties pay double the tax rate. We can talk about stabilizing taxes all we want without offering solutions because nobody wants to cut. What we really need to be doing is we need to be figuring out how do we leverage what we already have here to attract new business into Salem.
Now, when you say new business, are you also referring to like big box stores and stuff like that? Or are you speaking specifically about like downtown Salem businesses, tech businesses?
Yeah,
stuff like that?
yeah. I'm not speaking for big tech, unfortunately, or big box stores. I think that this is probably a separate topic altogether. But big box stores don't contribute enough tax revenue per square foot. Then if you take you know, a grouping of even like pawn shops and bars on a set parcel of land, and you compare that to a Walmart, they're generating more tax revenue than the Walmart is generating. So I think that attracting big box stores is probably not something that we should be actively trying to do in Salem. Not saying we shouldn't have any, but I don't think that it should be a key part of our initiatives. I think looking at attracting employers and tech companies, I don't think Microsoft or Apple is coming to Salem, but I think that there are small startups that would be interested in locating in places like Shetland Park, downtown Salem, maybe even some of our old industrial buildings. Those can be incubators for companies like that. I think that that's important. We've got a talent base here right now that lives here and unfortunately works in Boston and Burlington and places like that. They could be just here, and this could be home, and this could be the place that they work as well.
That's right.
But I think it's going to take some.
So, in addition to creating more jobs, obviously, if those startup tech companies come to Salem, for example, how else would that benefit the residents? Like, would that help in terms of consumer costs as it relates to any type of competitive things like cable, for example, or internet providers, or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, potentially. So you would have. Those companies would need the infrastructure so that the city could definitely benefit off of that. I think taxes is probably the biggest one. I think traffic's probably another one too. So if you have employers located here in Salem, people living here in Salem, rather than all of us trying to get our cars to get out of here during the day to go to our jobs, I think that it would be important to have people living and working within the same community. I think that would be helpful for sure. And then also just in rehabbing some old buildings that maybe are some old properties that have been neglected over the years.
I wanted to ask you a couple of things. So, true or false, science is real?
True.
Okay, good. True or false?
I'd be real surprised in the interview if that's a false there.
Right. True or false? We've gone from a climate change to a climate crisis.
True.
How can we combat the climate crisis specifically in Salem?
I think there's so it's probably a two-pronged approach, and it's not easy. I think that the first one is just mitigating, I guess, the effects of what most scientists are telling you is going to happen here in Salem, which is we're going to have rising sea levels, we're going to have more extreme weather situations that are going to happen. I think things like temporary flood walls that you can take, that DPW could deploy to locations quickly would be important. Forester Street I think it was last week, that Forester Street flooded during that major storm that we had. If we'd had, I don't know the situation, but if we'd had flood walls and that we could have deployed in that situation, I think that could have potentially saved some heartache in that neighborhood. I think looking at things like, if you look at the climate resiliency report that we did in 2014, they called for more permeable asphalt is something that we could do just to eliminate some erosion that might happen, make sure that there's not as much runoff as we could see in the future. Repairing seawalls is also important. These are all things to just hopefully protect our city as these happen. Resiliency zoning probably in neighborhoods that are going to be susceptible to flooding over the next 20, 30, 40 years, requiring new development in those neighborhoods to be at a certain level. Because if developers are building in an area that's going to flood anyways and they walk away from it, the city of Salem is going to be left to clean up and to save those residents and to deal with the aftermath of that. So ensuring those developers are building something that's going to be resilient to any kind of flooding, I think, is important. And then the next one is just doing our part, and that's something every community needs to do. And it may feel like an uphill battle. We need to do things. I think that urban areas are the best hope that we have for combating climate change. Urban areas, people living closer together, using less resources, traveling less by car, encouraging people to not use their cars here in Salem as much as, people are always going to have cars probably. But if you give them ways to get around that don't involve a car, I think is important for the climate. And then also, just as a last one that people don't talk about as much as historic preservation, I think is a green initiative. Buildings that are built with quality materials tend to be greener than newer construction, and tearing something down and building something new is a cost. There's a cost to the environment there, and I think that we need to recognize that we've got some buildings here that are already historic in our natural resources.
Yeah, and when we look around the city, we definitely also see some areas that are maintained better than others. Actually, Felipe from Salem sent a question to us, and we're asking all of the candidates this question. Felipe wrote, "There's a clear disparity in the cleanliness and street maintenance of Salem neighborhoods, with poorer areas being less clean, less maintained than wealthier ones. What policies and strategies would you pursue to fix this situation?"
So I think that the issue we run into too is that a lot of times poor neighborhoods tend to be a little more dense in a lot of cases. And if you look at a neighborhood like The Point is our densest neighborhood in Salem. And I think that we could probably do a better job. And I think that I would say talking to residents there, they think that over the last year it has gotten a little bit better there because they've been doing a little more frequent street sweeping through the neighborhood. But recognizing that is something that we're going to do our street sweeping in all of our neighborhoods. But in The Point, we might need to do it twice as much because there's more trash being generated. There's more people living there. I think that's an important thing to know, and then also to just again to step outside of ourselves and look at other neighborhoods and realize that the people who are attending our city council meetings, great citizens for coming out, potentially a little more privileged than other citizens that aren't able to maybe make it to a meeting because they can't find childcare or they're working a second job. They may not, or transportation. That they may not be able to be there to advocate for their neighborhoods like they should, or like they would like to be. I think recognizing that is an important step also.
Do you think more resources, because of the density of the point, for example, should more resources be allocated to that area specifically to maintain and upkeep it better?
I think that for things like street sweeping, I think that probably is a common sense thing, that if you've got more people per square, per lot or whatever, per set parcel of land, you're going to have to dedicate some more city resources to it for sure.
Definitely. Ty, what are your top 3 priorities? If you're elected into city council, right? What are the 3 most important initiatives for you particularly? What ones are you most passionate about? So
right now it's housing. So it's making sure Salem can be a place that people from every income level can continue to live. I think that when I look back at what we've done around historic preservation in Salem, it's probably a mixed bag, but we have, at some point we recognized that historic buildings deserve to be saved, that we needed to intervene to save historic buildings. I think we need to do the same thing with diversity. I think we need to recognize that we've got a natural resource in Salem that is our people. And if we let the free market do what the free market's going to do, a lot of those people aren't going to be able to live here anymore. That's people from immigrant communities. It's also people from working families and younger people and seniors. There's a lot of people that won't be able to live in Salem in the next 20 years if things continue on current trends. So addressing the housing crisis now is something I think we need to do, because I think we'll regret it in the future if we don't. The second one is climate change. I think that's something that every single community in North America or in the world probably is going to have to deal with in the future. But particularly in coastal communities like Salem, I think that having a city council that's willing to take some action locally to protect our neighborhoods is going to be paramount in the next few years. And I think that it's something that at the next election it's going to be the number one. Right now, probably housing is the number one topic. I think our next election cycle, climate change will probably be our number one topic. And then the third one is the pace of development in Salem, and not just around affordability, but just around the quality that's coming into our neighborhoods. We talk about, we like to sort of label people in Salem as NIMBYs or YIMBYs, which is not in my backyard versus yes in my backyard. When I think that there's people that if you read a lot of urban planners, they'll talk about this term QUIMBY, which is quality in my backyard. Let's get away from those two terms and let's talk about what quality looks like. Because people are going to build, like cities change, development comes, development can be good, it can be bad, but what does quality look like? And I think quality is, it's green spaces, it's public transportation, it's mixed uses, it's mixed income levels living in the same neighborhoods. So as development comes in and we have leverage to, because there's variances requested or there's additional density being asked for, using that leverage to say, okay, well now this is what you're going to give us back. We're going to get some money put into our parks. We're going to get some public art in this location. We're going to get, I think there's smart ways we can do that. Vancouver, British Columbia has done a great job of density bonusing and leveraging the desire for developers to build to get things that they wouldn't be able to afford normally. I think Salem can do something very, very similar.
Why should people vote for you, Ty?
So I think that I think what we need on the council right now is we need people with leadership experience. And we have a little bit right now. I'm not saying that no councilors have leadership experience, but I think that when you've been in positions of leadership, it's a humbling experience. It's something that I, as a 22-year-old lieutenant, fresh out of college into the Army, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn about how to put yourself in other people's shoes, how to find common ground with people, how to talk to people who don't agree with you, how to find empathy with people. Like these are all things that you just sort of just learn by doing, and maybe you get burned along the way, but I think that people who've been in leadership positions for a long time learn what works and what doesn't. And I think that things like empathy, things like bravery, these are things that I think are important in leadership that I think we need on the council right now. I think we need people who can bring every neighborhood to the table. There's neighborhoods in Salem that maybe aren't being listened to because they've been labeled as complainers, but and maybe they do complain, but maybe they have reason to complain. And I think that writing those neighborhoods off and saying that well, these guys are just crazy over here, I don't think it benefits us. I think having leaders on the council who are willing to be brave and walk into those places and have conversations with people who might not agree with them and find places where they can agree, or maybe even change their own opinions. I'm somebody who is, I have my values are strict in what I know that I believe and what I stand for, but my opinions on various topics, I'm open to other people's opinions and other ways of looking at things. I don't let my own ego get in the way.
Mm-hmm.
I think these are qualities that we need on the council today. I think especially in this time of change.
Absolutely. Ty, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for coming in. It's been a pleasure getting to know you a little bit better, and hopefully the people that will be viewing this video will have a little bit more of an in-depth look at your opinions and policies and everything like that. Good luck with the rest of your campaign. We certainly wish you well and look forward to seeing you more out on the campaign trail.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.